Good evening everybody, good morning, good afternoon, wherever it may be in your part of the world. This is Dingo, 217 Squadron Leader and real world private pilot with hours on many of the types seen in DCS, which is our focus for today. And today we're going to be focusing on one type in game, the P-51D Mustang. Now I have hours in a real one of these. It's actually a TF-51D Contrary Mary based out of Sywell, and you can take rides in this particular aircraft. I'll post the link for that in the description in YouTube. Now the aircraft you see here is in 217 Squadron's colour scheme. Rather beautiful if I do say so myself. Now today we're going to be covering taxi and takeoff. You may notice that I've got the engine already running and I've auto started this plane, and you may go, okay, why are you auto starting every tutorial? And there is a reason for this, and that is when you auto start the P-51 in DCS, it says to you in the corner here, in the stripe that comes down, trim nose 2 degrees high. But if I look at the trim wheel down here, that isn't what it's done. It's trimmed it nose down by quite a long way. So before I do anything else, let's correct this, shall we? So I'm going to pull back the trim. Now your perspective in sim makes this a little bit difficult to actually judge precisely what your trim degree is. So I'm going to pull it back, and the way I measure 2 degrees is that I set it so this yellow marker is just behind this yellow triangle. That gives us approximately 2 degrees nose high. Now before we get moving, let's cover the important things that we need to pay attention to when flying the Mustang. First is the coolant temperature. Now if you notice here, we have a green line, it's not very wide, and then we have a red line. If you take the temperature past that red line, your engine will not last very long before it goes kaput, and that is not something you want to happen in a dogfight. You also have down here the oil temperatures, and again you have a green arc. That's where the plane's happiest, but you can be below that, no problem. You can go up to the red line, but if the minute you pass that red line, again, you're running on borrowed time before your engine seizes. Again, not a good thing to happen. Real world, you keep an eye on these and you sort of manage them with power and the switches I'm going to show you in just a moment. But before I start that, with DCS you can actually cheat a little bit. You see these switches down here, these two. Now in DCS you can run them constantly open. It's not a problem. You wouldn't do it real world. It wouldn't really be a massive problem if you did, but you don't do it. So I'm going to reset those as they were, and the ram air is something we will deal with in the air. If you're really worried about blowing your engine, like if you just kind of want that extra bit of security for takeoff, you can leave these switches forward, but that's not what I'm going to do today. Today I'm going to run this as close to real world operation as I can within DCS, and give you a pretty takeoff and without blowing anything up. So now let's taxi. By the way, we're in Las Vegas. Over there is the strip where I lost a ton of money before this started. Now the Mustang is probably one of the easier ones to handle on the ground because you do not need differential braking. You do, but it will turn just fine with just the rudders. Real world, you would push the stick fully forward during taxi. But in DCS, if you do that, it actually locks the tail wheel, which is not something you want to happen. And pulling the stick backwards, which is counter opposite of real world, it doesn't seem to do a great deal. So you end up using quite a bit of differential braking to get yourself lined up, which again, real world you can do. It's not recommended. It's not really how you operate this plane, but for the sake of the sim, you kind of have to. So I'm going to line up. And by the way, I am skipping the power checks which you would do real world, because in DCS you don't really need to do them. And you'll notice as well that lining up can be quite difficult because I can't see over the nose, and you can't see over the nose unless you cheat, which again in real world you couldn't do. But real world you do kind of like an S turn, and then look out. If you've got a VR headset you can kind of sort of lean out the side of the plane and see where you're going. But here we are, we're set up on the runway, we're lined up, and here's something that's optional, flaps. If you're on a short field, recommended to use 10 degrees of flap, one stage. So that's 5 degrees, I apologise. But we got a long runway, so we don't need to do that. And here is where the people who fly this thing for the first time can encounter another issue, in that a lot of them will go just straight to full power. Do not go straight to full power. You want to go gradually on with the power, because it's a big engine with a lot of torque, up to 55 inches of manifold pressure via this gauge here. So, final pre-takeoff checks. Temperatures and pressures are good. Props fully forward, mixture fully rich, trim set as required. And at this point I will be calling air traffic control to say Nevada Tower, Golf Bravo, X-Ray Victor, departure to the east. I screwed that one up. Whoops-a-daisy, the perils of recording live straight to it. It would be Nevada Tower, Golf Bravo, X-Ray, ready for departure to the east. And they'd come back, they'd tell me the winds, and I'd say I'd acknowledge that, and I would go. So without further ado, let's take this thing to the air. Gradually on with the power, so 55 inches of manifold pressure. I'm on the rudders, making sure I'm straight on the runway. Here we go. You'll notice I've hit the red line on the RPM. Real world, you wouldn't really do that, but you can pull it back just a fraction if you want, just to make yourself a little bit more comfortable. And the aircraft has taken itself off already, and I drifted off the runway. That was terrible. We are now airborne. Gear is up, and we are flying. So now we're in the air. We can trim the aircraft. We can pull the RPM back to the green arc. And that automatically brings back the manifold pressure as well. So you trim the aircraft, and you notice straight away after takeoff, and this is where DCS has a little bit of a bug, in that I'm already almost on red line on the coolant. So here's where the cheat comes in. I come down here, take this first one nearest to the front, and I push it forward. And I look at the temperature again, and it's still there. So I would pull the other one, push it forward, open the ram out. By the way, make sure you're at least reasonably trimmed before you do that, and you'll notice that gradually the temperatures are going to start coming back, which is exactly what we want it to do. But now we're up, we are airborne in the Mustang. So I'm going to circle for a moment, and I'm going to let the temperatures come back and let you know let you see what effect that cheat has. I'm going to head down to the strip. I lost some money there, and I don't like that. So now my temperatures have come back to a reasonable level, I can start pushing the RPM up again. So I've got RPM and throttle both pushed forward, just under red line on the RPM and just under red line on the manifold pressure, and you'll notice that my temperatures aren't really moving. So you'll notice that underneath me my ram air scoop is open, which is almost a distinguishing feature of the Mustang. So here we go, I'm running this thing just over red line, well out of the green arc, and my temperatures are fine. So if you're dogfighting, we'd be on 4YA's World War II server, or just messing around with friends, that's a little cheat you can do, because if they haven't seen this video, they're not going to know that. So you have the advantage in that you can run faster, harder, for longer. Now that's not to say this is going to work 100% of the time. You still need to keep an eye on the temperatures, and that's a good thing to do. So just make sure that while you're flying, whenever you've got a clear second, just have a quick glance down to see what the temperatures are doing, make sure they're A-OK. And I'm going to go down here to the pyramid. See, that was where I lost most of my money before this, so I'm going to drop a couple of rounds on that Sphinx. Good night, Sphinx. Okay, so hopefully you found this useful, and I will be producing more of these as time goes on. I am very busy, so it will be few and far between, but I'll do them where I can. This has been Dingo, 217 Squadron Leader, and Real World Pilots, signing off for your evening.